Hi, hello, and welcome. I'm just going to wait a couple moments before we officially get started today. But we are so excited to have you here for our latest Business Essentials series, where our topic is going to be building a culture of inclusion, trust, and empowerment. So we are, again, very excited as more and more people are coming in from the waiting room. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we officially begin. For today's presentation. If you do have any questions for our guest speakers, please go ahead and put that in the Q&A box feature of Zoom. Otherwise, we will do our best to look at the chat as well, but I will primarily be looking at the Q&A and making sure that everything's good to go there and sharing that with our speakers to answer those questions. So for those that are just joining us, welcome. We are so excited to have you here today. My name is Alexia Brewster. I am a program manager here at Forte for our professional team, and I primarily run our webinar series. And so you are here today for our latest Business Essential webinar series, Building a Culture of Inclusion, Trust, and Empowerment. So we are very excited. This webinar is actually done in partnership with one of the Forte business schools we have a partnership with, Drexel, in Philly, which is actually where I'm from. So very excited to be able to offer this series to our guest here today. So with that, what I'm going to do, so we can go ahead and get started. Oh, sorry about that. Is I'm going to introduce our school partner. So Mark Durkis, he is the Director of Recruitment for Executive Education at LeBow College of Business, Drexel University. So he has some things to share with us really quickly about Drexel. And then from there, I'm going to introduce our guest speaker. So Mark, please go ahead and take it away.
Sure. Thank you, Alexia. My name is Mark Durkis. I'm the Director of Recruitment for Executive Programs here at Drexel University's LeBow College of Business in Philadelphia. And so what that means is we do quite a few things in executive education, primarily the Executive MBA program, which is a part-time 16-month program designed for seasoned professionals and executives. We also have a part-time Doctorate of Business Administration, the DBA, for those who already have a master's degree and looking to learn top-level research skills in a doctorate setting. And then, of course, we also have customized programs for our corporate partners, particularly in the areas of professional development. So in other words, some of our corporate partners outsource their employee professional development to our research faculty and our faculty experts in a variety of different areas, ranging from finance to leadership training to, organizational behavior, all different types of business areas. And so Drexel is located right in University City, Philadelphia, three major universities in our little section of the city, only 2 blocks away from the Amtrak station. So very easily accessible from pretty much the whole Northeast corridor. You could literally walk to Drexel from there. We're a R1 research university. And we like to say that Drexel is located at the intersection of industry and academia. So we have a lot of corporate partners. We have partnerships with some of the major employers in the Philadelphia area. We use those partnerships to enhance our academic offerings and pretty much the classroom experience as well. So you're really getting a very good industry-based education in the executive education space. Our executive MBA program really emphasizes the themes of strategy, leadership, and evidence-based decision-making, and pretty much overall business judgment, really hallmarks of an executive education experience. To learn more, please contact me. I'd be very interested in sitting down with you one-on-one on a Zoom or a phone call. We can talk about your goals, your expectations, what you're looking in for a school. Please use me as a resource. Please reach out to me, and I'd be very interested in meeting with you one-on-one and talking about your next steps in your education. So thank you all for joining us today. I hope you really enjoy the session, and I'll send it back to Alexia.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mark. Yeah. And again, if anyone here is considering an MBA program, obviously, Forte, we do a lot to further our mission of more women leading, and LeBow College of Business at Drexel obviously is one of our partners. So please feel free to connect with Mark, definitely ask those questions. And something I also want to do is actually launch a quick poll for everybody. So we do want to get a sense before we get into the meat of the presentation today of who's in the audience. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll. So this is going to kind of help our guest speakers just be more informed about the how they're speaking about the topic, and seeing what is a good fit for this audience that's here today. So if you have a moment, please go ahead, answer the question. It's basically asking like, how would you best describe your current status? So we're trying to see who here may be a current Forte student, a fellow maybe, or a working professional, whether you have a master's, you don't have a master's, or someone who may work with one of our partner universities. So feel free to answer that poll. I'll give it a couple more seconds. Just for us to see. Okay, looks like most people have answered. So I'm going to go ahead and end it. So it looks like a good variety of people. So we have some current students, we have some working professionals, and some who are looking to receive a master's degree. So definitely check out LeBow College of Business. So kind of putting that plug there. So with that, what I would like to do now is actually introduce our featured speaker for today's Business Essentials series. And it's Dr. Lauren Dinocenzo. And so she is the Associate Professor of Organizational Behavior, Managing Director of DBA Program, and Provost Solutions Fellow. So with that, Lauren, thank you so much for being here today. We're really excited to have you talk on this topic. And again, I'll be monitoring the Q&A box, so if anyone has questions, please let us know, and we'll get to them towards the end.
Wonderful. Well, Alexia, thank you for having me here today. And thank you everyone for taking some time out of your day to join us. I know that we've all got busy schedules, and so it's nice to have everyone here to share a little bit about the research that we have going on here at Drexel University. And so today's topic is building an exceptional culture of inclusion, trust, and empowerment. To give you a little bit of background about myself, so I have my PhD in organizational behavior. I'm the managing director of our DBA program. I've also recently founded a company where we do evidence-based team analytics. A lot of my research and teaching is focused on teams and leadership. And so in my work, I take a very applied approach. And my sense is that if we can take what we learn from organizations, from everyone who is facing different challenges, and actually use research to solve those problems or address those and give us some answers, then we can do a much better job moving forward to actually make changes that are going to stick. So I've worked in a variety of organizations, from governmental organizations, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, in the tech space, different military organizations. I currently have just over $1 million grant from the U.S. Army Institute to study team dynamics, and particularly what happens when teams change. You might not always work with the same individuals. So how do we make sure that our teams are best able to adapt? So a lot of what I'm going to share with you today comes from the research that myself and my colleagues have been working on in trying to understand how can we develop the most effective culture that's going to help individuals feel more engaged, but also we can make sure that we're retaining the people that we want to retain in order to keep that continuity and that high level of performance. So, if you're coming to this, then probably the title struck you as interesting. But if you've ever asked questions like, how can I retain the people around me? Or how can I build high performing teams? How can I motivate my team? Or maybe you're part of a team where people just don't feel committed. They feel like they're a little bit scattered. If you've ever asked those kinds of questions, you're not alone. A lot of people are asking these, and engagement is quite a challenge for organizations. On average, we see between employees who are actively disengaged, and we also say that they're not engaged in their work, it's about 70% of the workforce at any given time is either lacks engagement or says that they are actively disengaged. Disengaged employees cost us a lot of money as an economy. Broadly speaking, estimates around $350 billion each year. And what we're seeing, especially since in the past couple years, is we're seeing about a 2 percentage point decline in engagement. So we actually saw a spike in engagement around COVID, and then we saw that slowly moving down, and that trend is continuing down. On top of this, we also see that there's a good portion of the workplace, and maybe you're one of them, that is planning some type of major career transition. So that's where education comes into play to help you pivot into those different domains, into what you're doing. But about 46% is looking to make that career change. So the big question that comes to my mind when I see statistics like this and in my own work is, if we know that engagement's a problem, how can we change the behaviors of those people who we work with, or maybe even ourselves? Maybe you're out there and saying, I don't feel terribly engaged in what I'm doing. So what I like to rely on, it's a pretty simple formula. The formula was developed by a scientist named Kurt Lewin. Kurt Lewin was a German-American psychologist, and he came up with this notion of how we influence behavior. What Kurt said was that, we can look at the person and we can try to change the person, but anyone out there, if you've tried to change someone, that doesn't always work. One of the biggest influences on behavior is the environment, what we surround ourselves with. And so if we take this formula and we say, well, how people behave is a function of who they are and the environment that they're in, right? So if we're looking for a different kind of behavior, we can try to influence the person. That's challenging. Can we influence the environment? Can we change something about how we interact, how our workplace is set up, or just generally the culture within our organization? If we can do that, we can change people's behavior and ultimately try to get them more engaged and to stay with our organization. So based on kind of putting together what we've learned from research over decades, we've come up with this framework called the Excite framework. And the idea here is that we can improve engagement and retention by creating an exceptional culture of inclusion, trust, and empowerment. So if we can hit on these different elements, inclusion, trust, and empowerment, we can help to build that culture that can help to change the behavior and how people feel that we work with and within our companies. So what does this look like? I want to kind of break down each of these, give you something to think about along these lines. And as Alexa shared, as you have different questions, feel free to put those in and we can get to those at the end of our session. Now, empowerment's probably a term that you've heard of. It gets bounced around. There are a lot of different organizations that try to have empowerment initiatives as a way of doing more with the people that they have. But what is empowerment? So empowerment at its core is feeling like I have meaning and purpose, and I have the ability to do what I need to do to be successful. We know that when people feel empowered, research tells us that they feel more motivated at work, they perform better, they're willing to go the extra mile, more productive, they're embracing change, better communicators, all of these things that we would really love to see in our people. And so empowerment is one of these really critical levers that can do that. And if you'd like more evidence on this, so one of the things that I look to in research as well is, well, what is research saying? And if we look at it across the board, we can look at meta-analyses. Meta-analyses essentially look at trends, and they look at analyses across multiple studies. And what meta-analytic results tell us is that when employees feel empowered, when they feel meaning and purpose in their work, that accounts for 30% of the variance in performance. 30%. That is a huge amount if you're thinking about behavior driving the things that you're looking to achieve, to drive those KPIs and those performance metrics. If you're looking to make a change and make a boost in your performance, you can look at process-based avenues, but one of the most potent sources, and this is something that I turn to a lot with what Mark was saying, a lot of the corporate and executive education work we do, is how can we create a more empowered environment and a more empowered employee? Because we're going to see around up to 30% of increases in performance as we improve their empowerment. So to drill down a little bit more, when we feel empowered, we allow people to be accountable and make decisions. So as a leader, if we want to empower our employees, we allow them to be able to voice their opinions, make decisions, but we also have to hold them accountable. So it's not a free-for-all. It's not saying, hey, well, you can do whatever you want. There's accountability and decision-making as part of that process. When we feel empowered, team members typically feel like we have more control over our outcomes because I had a say in what's going on. We feel meaning in our work. We feel like we're actually making an impact. and we feel competent, that we know what it is that we're doing. And these are the 4 essential elements of empowerment: feeling like you have control, finding meaning and impact, and feeling that competence, right? So we can pull on different levers to get people to feel more empowered through these different areas. Again, empowerment is so powerful because when we see employees, when they have meaningful work, they are willing to spend, on average, 1 additional hour per week working. And especially for non-salaried employees, they're willing to do this and not be paid for it. People are taking 2 fewer days of paid leave each year when they feel like they have more meaning and purpose in their work. And what we also see is that with companies that show highly engaged people, they have higher employee retention rates, about 54% increase in employee retention, and they're seeing an increase in external behaviors, so an increase in customers who are working with these employees. Why? Because if I'm engaged as an employee, I'm willing to do a little bit more. I'm a better communicator, right? I'm more involved in what's going on. And so we tend to see that trickle outside of the organization as well, to see customers who also feel that satisfaction. So if empowerment sounds something interesting, or maybe you say, hey, we've tried this, or I'm not really sure how to do this, here are a couple of different strategies that you can think about in order to empower those around you. The first is that we want to selectively grant empowerment. So I'm not saying give anybody free reins to do anything that they want. We want to allow people to be involved in that decision-making process, to demonstrate their competence when they've demonstrated the ability to do so. So I'm not going to necessarily empower those folks who are green to the organization or somebody new to my team, but I want to see what they're able to do. So we need to have some guardrails around how we do this. Because one of the components is competence, we want to encourage people to grow their skills. So depending on the job responsibilities that they have, are there different techniques or strategies or tools that are out there that we can say, hey, go and learn those, and we want you to bring those back to what it is that we're doing. So encourage people to grow their skills. As leaders, or even as peers, we want to provide support, especially when we do empower and we say, go ahead, you can handle this as you see best fit. Don't nitpick, right? Don't turn it around and then immediately say, well, I told you you can do whatever you want, but really I want you to do this and this and this, and this isn't good. So you can give feedback, but don't nitpick. Another piece very critical to empowerment is allowing people to choose how they will do their tasks. So this comes up quite a bit as we are working more remote or in hybrid formats, right? One of the nice things that we learned coming out of COVID when it comes to work is that we can be really productive when we work remotely or in a hybrid manner. But how we do work might be a little bit different. And we've learned that we enjoy the flexibility. So if we allow people to choose how they do their tasks, it could be, well, if I don't need this by 5 o'clock, I just need it by the end of today. Can people shift around how they're managing their time throughout the day as long as they get it done? Or maybe there's a particular kind of software that someone sees as more valuable or more efficient. Let them use that in performing the analysis, right? So there's different ways that we can think about how we let people choose how they're going to do their tasks. The second piece to this framework of Excite is trust. And a lot of us are familiar with trust just from working, from our personal lives, right? There's a lot of different ways that we can think about trust, right? Do we actually believe in the intentions of the other individual? When we think about trust, there's some different ways that we can consider it. And I want to go to a research study that was done. And in just a moment, I'm going to ask you to kind of make a vote on this. This research study looked at who people would rather work with in the workplace, right? And the key word there is work with. Now, so not work for, I'm asking who you want to work with. This study went out and surveyed a number of individuals and tried to boil down, well, what does this mean? 2 different dimensions. Right? There's we want to work with people who are competent and know what they're doing, and we don't want to work with people who don't. And we want to work with people who we like, versus people who are, let's say, more of a jerk. So it boiled down to this competence and likability. But we don't always get to work with the really super competent, really lovable person. What happens if we have a mix? So what Alexia just pulled up here on your screen, I'd like you to answer, who would you rather work with? If you had a choice, would you rather it be the competent jerk or the lovable fool? So just entertain for a little bit. You have these two people who are there in front of you. You have the decision of who you're going to work with. Are you going to choose the competent jerk or the lovable fool? So Alexia, I'm not sure if you can tell how many have submitted their responses. Looks like, wow, we are evenly split. Okay. So half of you say the competent jerk, the other half are saying the lovable fool. Right. And if I were able to ask you, well, why would you pick one or the other? And I've done this a number of times in the classroom. When I go to those who say the competent jerk, they'll share with me, excuse me, they'll share with me and say, well, I need to get work done. I think I need a little more time. I need to get work done. And so I need to work with somebody who is competent, who knows what they're doing. And I can kind of deal with the fact that they're a jerk, right? I can get over it. Who cares? We need to get stuff done. For those who say the lovable fool, what I'll hear is, well, yes, we need to get our work done, but the environment and my sanity really matters, right? So working with someone who I know that I can rely on, someone who I know is going to be supportive and is not going to be hard to work with, that really makes a big difference, because emotions are contagious. And if I'm working with someone who's a jerk, that's just going to bring the whole group down, right? The kind of that bad apple in the bunch. So in this research study, they went out and they asked people this question, and overwhelmingly, people said, I would rather work with the competent jerk. But these researchers weren't necessarily, sold on that. They said, okay, you say you want to work with a competent jerk, but let's see what you choose. So they went out and they observed, what did people do when they had this choice? And now, this research was published a couple of years back now in the Harvard Business Review, looking at what people would do. And what they observed was that people more often actually worked with the lovable fool. So people were saying, I'd rather work with someone who knows how to get work done. But when push comes to shove, they were choosing the lovable fool. Now, what does this have to do with trust? We know that trust, there's different ways of thinking about it. We can have either a competence-based trust or an affect-based trust. Both of those things matter. I want to trust you from a competence perspective, that I know what you're giving me is accurate, that you're giving me factual information and it's going to help us do our work. But also an important factor of trust is that affect, is how we feel about people. Do I trust in your intentions? Are you a good person? Can I work with you? Do I like coming to work with you? And so what we see is that oftentimes this affect-based trust really shines through and is the deciding factor in a lot of cases on who people would rather work with. Now, just to make it super clear, I am not saying go out and hire a bunch of lovable fools. Your organization will fail. You are not going to do well, right? We're always going to have this mix. The key takeaway here, though, is that how you make people feel matters. It can matter in terms of how we build trust, how we build relationships, and ultimately behavior. So I want to give you another key strategy or something you can think about to help build that trust, to help build that positive connection with others. Now, this research actually comes from a colleague of mine across the street, Adam Grant, who's done a lot of work around how do we understand these behaviors of individuals. And one of the studies that he published was on this idea of the power of thanks. So this is a really low-cost way. It's a very easy way of being able to change the behaviors, but get people to feel different ways. So I'm going to share 3 different research studies here pretty briefly. The context of these research studies is that we had, like, picture a lab. People are coming into, they're at a university. you've got some participants who are coming into the lab to complete this research study. The basis of the study is that there's this resume and cover letter that needs to be read, assessed, and you need to provide feedback, right? And so part of the study, you're going to do that, and you're going to send that feedback back off to the person who wrote it. Coming into the lab, you think that there's a real person behind it. It's actually a Confederate, right? These are the same resumes and cover letters that everybody's reading. But as part of that, before you actually did the assessment, the research team gathered a number of individual differences. So things like how we feel about ourselves, personality, etc. They had the participants read the resumes, read the cover letters, send them off. And then they had two different conditions. In one condition, the participants received an email back that said, I received your feedback on my cover letter, right? Condition 1. Condition 2 is I received your feedback on my cover letter. Thank you so much. I'm really grateful. So the only change here is really that thanks, right? There's an acknowledgement and then there's a thanks. What the researchers did after receiving this was measure those same elements again. So things like self-worth, personality, etc. What they saw was that when you received an acknowledgement that your work was received and it was done, you felt better about yourself. There was about a 25% increase in self-worth, right? So that goes to the value of simply replying and letting somebody know that what you did was received. In the condition where they added the thank you, they saw a 55% increase in self-worth, right? So simply adding thank you increased the self-worth of that person doing the work by an extra 30%. That's pretty significant. One of the other things they looked at was future helping behavior. So before the person left the room, they said, oh, hey, wait, would you mind doing another one for us? We have another resume and a cover letter. Would you mind doing that? And they wanted to see what percentage of people would actually stay and help out again. Those that were in the acknowledgement condition, about a third of them stayed to do more, right? So acknowledgement is important. Those who received the thank you, about 2/3 stayed to help more. Again, the only difference here is that you're receiving a thank you. The third and final research study. So this one, the context is a little bit different. This was done looking at institutional advancement offices. So those are the groups at the university that once you graduate, they call you and they say, hey, would you like to donate to our university? So picture people in call centers, they're making these phone calls, talking to alumni, trying to get money. Right, so in the first condition, what they did was they had the director for the institutional advancement office do nothing. It was work as usual, let everyone who works for you make their calls and see what happens. In the second condition, the director of the institutional advancement for just a period walked in and just paused everyone's work and said, hey, I'm very grateful for your hard work and we sincerely appreciate your contributions to the university. Right? And then left the room and that was it. The researchers wanted to see how much extra work the employees at the institutional advancement office would do. In the condition where nothing was done, you might be able to guess that nothing more was done, that people did their work as usual, they made the number of calls that they were supposed to, and they left for the day. In the condition where the director stopped to show their appreciation and thanks, 50% more calls were made. 50%, right? That is a lot more when you think about calls. And what they saw after that was that it actually translated to more donations coming into the university. So just stopping to say thank you went a whole long way, right? We saw that in terms of improvement of self-worth, future helping behaviors, and just simply doing extra work. So when we do these things to show our appreciation, it helps to build trust. The final piece I want to mention here is inclusion. Inclusion is one of those words that we hear sometimes, and maybe we understand what inclusion refers to. Sometimes it gets confused with the word diversity. The way I like to think about it is diversity is giving everyone of different backgrounds and experiences a seat at the table. Inclusion is giving everyone at that table a voice. right? So we can be diverse, we can have a diverse team, we can have a diverse organization, but that doesn't actually mean that we're going to leverage that diversity. And that's one of the key findings in diversity research, is that the results are somewhat equivocal. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. And one of those reasons why is we lack this extra effort, which is inclusion. And if we formally think, well, how do we define inclusion? Inclusion is the achievement of a work environment in which all individuals are treated fairly and respectfully, have equal access to opportunities and resources, and can contribute fully to the organization's success. So we want to think about creating an inclusive environment. Now, question for you. And I'm going to ask Alexia to put up another poll here. Does allowing input create an environment where people feel like they can speak up, where they can have that voice at the table? So if you can just hit yes or no here, does allowing input create that safe environment to allow people the opportunity to feel comfortable to speak up? Let's see where the results lie. So do we have more saying yes or more saying no? So about 2/3 of you say yes, about a third of you say no, that it does not create a safe environment. Well, my follow-up question is, for those of you who said yes or no, what's the difference between allowing versus encouraging? So if I switch that word allowing and said, does encouraging input create a safe environment? I bet you we'd see a little bit of a difference there in our response. So what is the difference between allowing versus encouraging? Well, oftentimes when leaders, and I've heard this in my own research, when they say that they're open to input, what they really mean is that they allow it, but they haven't necessarily encouraged it, right? So I've spoken to some managers who aren't getting people within their teams to speak up, and they'll say, well, I never told anyone they couldn't speak up. Yeah, but you also didn't encourage them to speak up either, right? So what we need to do is take less of that passive approach and just wait for people to do it and encourage. So what does encouraging look like, right? Reaching out and saying, hey, Mark, I would love to hear your opinion on that. Or, hey, Steve, what do you think about this? Asking what people think, encouraging them, telling them that you value their opinion. All of these things create that safer environment where people feel like they can speak up. Now, each one of these three that we've talked about as part of the Excite framework, empowerment, trust, and inclusion, these are all things that you can do. You can create this environment around people to change their behavior. So what I ask for you to do is to think about whether you're a leader, a manager, a contributor, whatever it might be, why do you do the things the way that you do? Right? We get very ingrained and embedded in what we do. And oftentimes that's what drives the culture, right? Sometimes we don't necessarily know why we do things. It's just what's done. So do you allow versus encourage input? Do you show appreciation to those around you? And do you help others to find meaning and purpose in their work? If you're doing these things, research shows that you can actually make a very tangible difference and a positive effect on the behaviors of those around you, and ultimately help to increase engagement, but also improve the retention levels of those around you. And so with that, I appreciate you all for sticking with this and spending some time with us. If you'd like to connect with me further, I have a QR here for my LinkedIn. Feel free to connect and reach out. I'd love to hear more from you, but I will pause now and open the floor for questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much again, Lauren, for speaking on this topic of inclusion. Being a nonprofit that's focused on more women leading up, this is a topic we talk about a lot. And so I definitely want to open it up the floor to any questions that people have. Please feel free to put it in the Q&A feature of Zoom. Otherwise, I'll try my best to also look at the chat. We do have one question that came in right away, so I do want to ask that of you. So the first question that came in is, when you're working with companies or individuals who want to build inclusion, trust, and empowerment and use this framework that you described, what are common challenges you run into with getting their buy-in for this model? So they say they want to do it, but then you've noticed there's a lot of sticking points. So what are common, have you noticed any like common challenges that that companies can face, or even individuals that are going to try to use this in their own sphere of influence?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. And I think what you said there at the end, Alexia, is so important within the sphere of influence. So if you currently work for an organization that does not value these pieces, right, or they're not actively engaged with it, it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to go up to the CEO and say, hey, let's change our culture and we need to be doing ABC. That's just not going to happen. Right. So you need to think about what can you influence locally? What can you do on your teams? What can you do with the individuals around you? Or if you're a leader, how can you put these things in place for your teams? One of the biggest challenges I also see is around time. So doing these things takes a little bit more purposeful interactions and engagements to say these kinds of things, to make sure that you're investing in people. You don't need to spend a whole lot of dollars, right? But in taking the time to talk with people and really genuinely listening to what they have to say. We know that people tend to leave conversations feeling better about it when they've talked more. So psychology would say that I'm going to leave this presentation thinking it was awesome because I talked a whole lot. And all of you who didn't get to talk, maybe you think like you might have different reactions to it, but the way this is set up makes it a little bit different. So time is one of the big challenges. Influencing up is one of those big challenges as well. And sometimes it can be really challenging if the person who's the most difficult, when thinking about the competent jerk example, is one of the most central people on your team. If they're where the work flows the most, if they have the most nuanced type of expertise, it could be really hard to do it. I say just be patient, find allies, find people around you who can help to engage in a different manner. And ultimately, what you want to be able to do is at the end of the day, show that the negative kinds of behavior just isn't the way that we want to do things. It's not rewarded. Certainly as a leader, you can hold people accountable right away for that. But those are typically the kinds of things that I see. There's a whole lot more that we can talk about, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of taste of some
Yeah,
of those challenges. I
I think
appreciate
so.
it.
I think that's a good like at least intro to, because this is a big question of like challenges because it can be so many
Absolutely.
different aspects. So I know I appreciate you kind of going into some of it maybe broader leadership level, but again, reminder that there are things you can control as an individual. So if you're wanting to implement this, just kind of do your best with what you are able to do and kind of know that you can't make everything change by yourself. So I think that's a good
Exactly.
reminder for sure. So there's another question that came in the Q&A box. So it is specifically about when you were talking about employee engagement. So you had cited that engaged employees take 2 days less of PTO. So talking about productivity there. And so this
Yep.
person, if you're able to, because I'm not sure if you're aware of like the study in detail, but can you dig more into the measurement and how it was measured? And is this something that companies want to see more of in their employees? So I think my assumption too is like they might be talking about that, maybe a little bit of that tension between companies want to have more productive employees that are taking less time off, but like employees also need breaks in order to be more productive. So kind of talking about that too.
Yeah, so that's another great question. We do need time off. And I think a lot of people don't take the time off that they have, especially here. I come into work on the train and I hear a good amount of conversation saying, I have 3 weeks of vacation time left and it is the end of the year and I haven't used anything. And I can't just take all that time off now. So I think overall we need to do a better job of spacing things out and taking that time for our own sanity, our own mental health, just to spend time with family, friends, and for ourselves. So we need to be doing that. So in no way am I advocating you need to be working more. That particular statistic just came from a survey of individuals who are working, where we looked simply just at the correlation between engagement and number of days taken off. And the correlation, the numbers showed that it was typically about 2 days less of taking that paid time off, because they were feeling also less burned out, and less emotionally exhausted because they were engaged and they were enjoying their work. So it's not like they felt like they had to work. It's that they wanted to be a part of that. So that's the best answer I have for that statistic.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that, yeah, explains it well as far as, again, that tension of like, you should take off because you have time, but also understanding that when you love what you do, you might not need to take as much time off. So I think that makes total sense. So thank you for the person who put that in the chat as well. I just want to, again, encourage, if anybody, we have time for like one more question. So those were the two main ones that came in the Q&A box. So if you are having any final questions, please go ahead and put them in. I'll give you a moment to write them up, because I know sometimes it does take a moment before we officially conclude today's session for our business essentials. All right. Just seeing if anybody else has questions. No.
As an instructor, that always means that what I said is perfectly clear, right? And there's no ambiguity to anything.
Exactly.
So, but I'm also a realist, and I know that that's not necessarily the case. So please feel free to reach out as well if there's anything to follow up on, even just based on what we shared here or what Mark shared earlier about what we offer at Drexel.
Yeah, and please do, for those in our audience here today, because I also know sometimes you need to process the content that you're receiving before you like questions start to develop. So definitely feel free to connect with Lauren on LinkedIn. You can see the QR code on the screen. Oh, someone actually just came in with a question. So we're gonna pause, and I'm gonna quickly read this out as well. Okay, so this one is talking about identities. So like culture and disabilities often impact a person's affect. So thinking of the appropriateness of showing a smile in certain situation, ASD, so autism spectrum disorder, etc., things like that. So what advice would you give leaders who are looking to improve their affects and make them more outwardly approachable to colleagues to be able to, again, achieve the model that you shared today?
That is such a great question, because we know that there are a lot of neurodiverse individuals who are in the workplace, neurodiverse individuals who are leaders. You can be very successful as someone who's neurodiverse. I think it gets down to you as managers or leaders, you need to understand people on an individual basis. And rather than going out with a blanket, here's how I'm going to approach this, you need to understand the different individual needs of those around you. Some people who maybe are on the spectrum don't need that social engagement. And in fact, they don't want it. And so understanding those things and what individuals' needs are, but also as leaders, right? If you're somebody who has different kinds of, like maybe you're more of an introvert, and leaders are expected to be extroverts. We know there are some pretty neat studies that say that extroversion actually predicts initial leader emergence within teams, but it does not predict leader effectiveness over time in teams. So the leader who is the most extroverted doesn't necessarily get the highest ratings on effectiveness. So you don't necessarily need to change your personality in order to fit the role, right? If you get to know people and develop relationships, you can be an introverted leader, right? As long as you're stepping in and doing the kinds of things that you need to do and engaging others. As an introvert myself, I know that it can be cognitively demanding, that by the end of the day, if you are engage, you're drained by the end of the day. So these things, you all have to think about these in terms of the bigger picture, in terms of how you present yourself. But it's something that I think if we're more open about our needs and have those conversations, right? Sitting down with an employee and saying, what can I do to help make your job easier? Hearing what they need, and respecting those things as well. What I may want as a leader might not be what my employee wants. Being respectful of that can help to create more of an inclusive environment. So I really appreciate the question.
Yeah, I definitely do too. I like that idea of like, kind of the idea of like treating others the way that you want to be treated. So in this inclusion umbrella, it's if you're someone who has like say you identify with a disability or a certain culture and you want it to be recognized, like doing the same for other individuals. And I really liked your idea of like see each individual instead of that blanket approach for inclusion, which makes total sense because everyone, again, comes from different backgrounds, have different things going on, and making sure you're addressing needs differently. So thank you for that answer. Really appreciate that. And thank you for, again, for the attendee who put that in the chat here for us. We are actually at time. I just realized it's 1:45, which is awesome. So I'm actually going to go ahead and conclude our presentation for today, or for our webinar series. So I am going to share my screen one final time. But I also want to say, again, thank you so much, Lauren, for being here today, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to meet with our other Forte audience members here. I know that this is a really good topic, I think, in general, and it's on a lot of people's minds when you think about DEIB stuff that's happening in today's work culture. So again, we are just so appreciative on behalf of Forte of having you here, having you speak to our audience and answer questions that they have concerning this topic.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. So for those who are still here with us, again, thank you for joining us for our Business Essentials series. We do record these sessions, and there will be an on-demand watching series as well. So if you're interested in playing it back, we will have a post on our website. It's going to be, again, listed on the fortefoundation.org website. Other things I want to mention is upcoming programs. So we actually have one more Business Essential before the end of the year. It's going to be December 12th, and it's looking at the future of business with AI. And it's sponsored by our school partner, Pepperdine University from California. So we're going to the other coast for this next one. But again, thank you all for being here today. We're very excited to have you here on this discussion. And a huge thank you to our partnership with Drexel University at LeBow College of Business. All right, with that, I hope you have a great rest of the day. And if you have any questions, definitely reach out to us.